Welcome back to another episode of Cape Ann Today with State Senator Bruce Tarr, who is very busy, even though it's high summer. How are you?
I'm doing well, Heather. Thanks. How are you today?
Good, I'm good. I know you have a vote coming up, and it is on the 2023 supplemental budget. So tell us why there is a supplemental budget, why we're still talking about 2023. What's going on?
Sure. And I would point out that this is actually a very busy time at the State House, as you had noted a little bit. We are scheduled to end formal legislative sessions on the 31st of July, and then we will resume them sometime after Labor Day. So this is typically a very busy period of time when we're trying to get everything done that could be controversial. We certainly don't stop for the month of August, but we don't entertain controversial matters. So that's why there's so much happening, and hopefully there'll be even more happening, because we still do not have a budget for fiscal year 2024, which started on July 1st. And so that's a matter of deep concern. There are a number of other bills that are backed up that we don't have final resolution on either. But from time to time, as we've talked about, we have to do supplemental budgets to account for deficiencies in various line items and to address contingent items that we need to deal with in between budgets. And so what we're doing today, I believe we'll do, I think this will pass, is doing a supplemental budget again for fiscal year 2023. So we're using fiscal year 2023 money, and we're going to respond to several different needs that we have. So one of them is fiscally constrained hospitals. We know that hospitals always have very tight budgets, at least in recent memory, and we know that they are struggling in a number of ways. So we have $180 million in this bill for our hospitals. We have $100 million, interestingly enough, for a transfer to the pension fund. And this dates back to the Baker administration, when at one point in time, there was an early retirement program. And that early retirement program came with a cost, because we accelerated retirement for a number of employees. And what we're doing in this supplemental budget is paying for that liability so that it's fully accounted for, will no longer be an issue going forward. We also have money in this account, and I won't list every item in it, but one of the significant things that we are addressing is $75 million for the cost of special education. And the reason this is particularly important is because many folks may recall that last year, the Operational Services Division allowed a tuition increase for the schools where students go that are outplaced for special education. And that was a 14% increase, much larger than any we've seen, maybe ever, but certainly in recent memory. And that accounts for about $75 million. Now, in the fiscal year 2024 budget, which hasn't passed yet, in the House and Senate version of those budgets, there are dollars to account for this next year. But the special education circuit breaker is a reimbursement program. So there's always a one-year lag. So this $75 million is to address the cash flow of school districts that will have to pay for that tuition increase now. And the estimated cost is about $75 million. And this is a really good example of things we need to do in supplemental budgets, because contingencies arise, we need to respond to them. So that's basically what we're doing with the supplemental budget. It totals about $513 million. The other thing that I should mention that is in the supplemental budget is authorization to pay for several collective bargaining agreements. From time to time, various institutions like colleges negotiate collective bargaining agreements with their respective unions, and they submit those to the legislature, and we have to approve payment of the terms of those collective bargaining agreements. And there are several of those in this supplemental budget. Now, what's interesting is that in the House supplemental budget, which totals almost $200 million more than the Senate version, there are additional collective bargaining agreements. The reason the Senate is not carrying those in our version of the budget is because we believe those will become due in the next fiscal year, and they will be appropriately funded, or the current fiscal year 2024, they'll be more properly accounted for that way. So that's why there's a discrepancy between the two versions of the supplemental budget.
So So that particular issue accounts for the full 200 million? Is that what you're saying?
The difference is primarily, there may be some other minor differences, but the primary difference is the House included some collective bargaining agreements that the Senate does not. And we will all need to fund everything. It's just a question of timing.
Right, right. Well, as I've read, there's also 20 million, I believe, that goes to relief to farmers who have really under the recent flooding, right?
Yes. And that is another item that was not included in the House version of this supplemental budget, but is included in the Ways and Means draft of the Senate version of the budget. And I am very hopeful and confident that it will be retained in the final version. And it's important. I've been having conversations with the Senate president about that. And even though this doesn't affect us directly, it does affect all of us when our farms are jeopardized as to their survivability and their sustainability. And I think this is an important item. And the reason that the number sounds relatively modest at $20 million is that we're anticipating that the federal government will come in with much larger sums, but we want to get started right away in responding to the difficulties that our farmers are facing in Western Massachusetts.
Well, this is a common story. This budget will need to be amended or brought into agreement with the House version, right? And we are right now still waiting for the fiscal year 2024 budget to come out of conference committee, right?
That's correct.
We've got two budgets, 2023 and 2024, and they both need to, come into agreement. Tell me what happened.
So it's a very insightful question because it will become part of the logjam that we have right now. We have a tax bill that has not come out of conference committee. We have a Chapter 90 road and bridge bill that has not come out of conference committee yet. And we have the budget for fiscal year 2024, the General Appropriations Act. So you might ask, well, will this meet the same fate? Will it get stalled in conference committee? I suspect that this particular bill will not because of the urgent nature of it. And I suspect we'll find a pretty ready resolution. And this could be one of those things where we actually don't go to conference committee. When we send this to the House, they may well exceed to some of the differences that we've put in, and we may be able to agree in very short order without going to a conference committee. But of course, a conference committee is always a possibility, and it would be the norm in these situations. And if we go to a conference committee, then we will just have one more iron in the conference committee fire to be able to get resolved, bearing in mind that formal sessions end next Monday. And so we'll all know, probably by the time our viewers are watching this, Heather, next week, we will know the next chapter in this drama to see if we get everything done by the end of formal sessions, if we have to suspend the rules and continue in formal session, or whether some of this stuff will get postponed into the month of September. So you hit the nail on the head when you said there's a lot happening on Beacon Hill, and there surely is.
Well, the next item, you are going to educate me on the Payroll Transparency Act.
And I'm happy to do that. You may recall that when we were debating the budget for fiscal year 2024 that the Senate adopted back in May, I offered an amendment that would close what I consider to be a loophole in the laws of the Commonwealth. So currently, all of our state agencies, every one of them, report their payroll to the state comptroller, and that is posted on the web so that folks can see what people get paid with their tax dollars. However, quasi-public agencies are not covered by the law. I was going to say exempt, but there's not a specific exemption. They're just not covered. And so I offered an amendment because I think it's only fair that these taxpayer-funded agencies also report their payroll so that we can have complete transparency. Well, that amendment didn't pass, but it did generate a lot of interest, a lot of newspaper editorials, and a lot of positive feedback for the legislature. So I filed that amendment as a bill, a piece of legislation. And that bill is actually being heard this afternoon by the Committee on State Administration. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to see favorable action from the committee. And I would point out, Heather, that there are about 11 or so quasi-public agencies that do report their information to the comptroller, but they do so voluntarily. And there are many, many more that do not report that information. And it seems to me to be only fair to have transparency across the board. So I've been working with the committee. They'll hold the public hearing today, and I'm hopeful that we'll have some positive news on this front to report very soon.
Well, can you give me an example of a quasi-public agency?
So the one that was featured in the Globe editorial was Zoo New England, which runs the Stoneham Zoo and the Franklin Park Zoo. They're quasi-public agencies, and they do not need to report their information, even though we support them with taxpayer expenditures, and so, or tax money expenditures. And there are many others that are out there. And there was a report done in 2010 by the Massachusetts Public Interest Research Group that highlighted all of them. And we can actually provide you with a link to that because it was a very interesting report. And again, there are a number of these agencies, and at some of them, the salaries tend to be very high because of the nature of what they do. And I don't take issue with the fact that we need these types of agencies, but I do think they should be subject to the rules of transparency that other payrolls have to follow.
So what makes them quasi-public?
They combine their operations. They are not exclusively funded with public money. They also oftentimes enter into private arrangements for part of their mission that involves private dollars. And they are not always directly accountable through the executive branch. Oftentimes they are operated through independent governance so that their chain of command doesn't run through up to the governor's office in the executive branch. So sources of funding and chain of command are the two things that distinguish them.
All right. Well, you're going to have a busy next couple of days, right?
We are indeed. And, it is also the height of summer, as you pointed out, and there are a lot of things happening all around the region. I was at the first meeting or the first event for the Bluefin Blowout this week, and that tournament will be happening. Yankee Homecoming is approaching in the city of Newburyport. So there are a lot of things happening, not only here on Beacon Hill, but also out in our communities. So look forward to dealing with all of those things and taking them one step at a time.
All right. Well, here's one more question. What are some of your favorite Gloucester 400 events?
Oh, my goodness. Well, some of them have actually already happened.
What have you been to that you really enjoyed?
So the very first event that I participated in, which I enjoyed tremendously, was held at the Gloucester House, and it was a narrative of a period of our history. And I got to read a timeline, essentially, and that was fantastic. And speaking of timelines, just a couple of weeks ago, we had Howard Blackburn Day at Maritime Gloucester, and I was honored to be able to read at that from Joe Garland's book, Lone Voyager. But a very much highlight of that event was something that was done by your colleague, Corey Kukuru, who did an unbelievable documentary about the life of Howard Blackburn. And it was so expansive in talking about not only the thing that we all know him for the most, his experiences in a dory and his survival, but so many other things. So that was a great event. Certainly the ball drop on New Year's Eve was fantastic. And we have Fishing Heritage Month coming up. It begins in August, and I'm very much looking forward to that and participating in some of those events. So congratulations to the Gloucester 400 Committee for keeping the events coming. And there have been a lot of wonderful events that I haven't been able to go to, but the ones that I have certainly have been tremendous.
Great. Yeah, they're doing a wonderful job. All right. Well, good luck with your next week, and we will talk to you soon.
We look forward to it. Thanks again, Heather, for giving us a chance to talk about what's happening on Beacon Hill. And I hope you have a great week and hope you enjoy all of that Gloucester summer that is streaming through those windows behind you.
I will. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.